Welcome, everybody, to a new edition of UFO Man Live. My name is Tim, or UFO Man, and to my side is my friend, my co host, Tommy Highway. Tommy?
Hey, folks, I'm Tommy Highway. I want to thank everybody for coming out as always. We have a fantastic show for you tonight, folks. We have a very special guest. We have a gentleman that is also an experiencer. And I remember when this story actually hit the airwaves, and I was a small child when this happened. So we're talking about the early 1970s. But it's one of those stories that absolutely went viral. I mean, everybody knew about this. All the news media was talking about it and the whole nine yards. They were interviewing people involved and everything. And it was just a big UFO story, folks. And we are privileged this evening to have Mr. Calvin Parker, one of the experiencers that this story actually happened to. He is with us this evening, folks. And Calvin, we want to thank you and welcome you to the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor. We've been trying a long time to get together on this.
Right. The last time we tried to get you, Hurricane Ida was coming your way.
Oh, yeah. We got a little damage from that. Not a whole lot, but it sure shut things down.
Well, we're glad you're here this evening, and we're really interested in hearing your story. So let's start off with asking you this question, Calvin. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to Pascagoula in the first place, and how your story began? You might as well just go right into your story.
Absolutely. I was working in the oil field in Laurel, Mississippi, and I was engaged to get married. This happened in October for November, and we had already set a date, but I was working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, and I wanted a different job. So I called a friend of my father's and a friend of mine, Charles Hickson, and asked him if he needed some help in the shipyard. He said, sure, come on down. So I went down on October the 10th, the day before the 11th, and got my physical and all that, and so I could go to work on the 11th. So that's when I went to work. That's how I became to get to Pascagoula. I just wanted a job for shorter hours than what I had. So that day we brassed in at the shipyard, which a brass in they give you like a dog tag with a number on it, and you hand it in at the gate, and that's your time card. So we brassed in, and it got time to get off. Charlie came to me. He said, son, would you like to go fishing? I said, absolutely, but I got one problem, Charlie. I don't have my fishing equipment with me. He said, no problem. He said, I'll loan you mine. Now, for a man from the South to loan you his fishing equipment, he just said give you his wife or your firstborn. I said, okay, I'll do it this time. So we went by his apartment, and of course, I was renting a room from him. Picked up the equipment and left and went to a place called the grain elevator, which they unload grains off a ship. And when that grain falls off, the fish comes up and eat it. And we stayed out there for a little while, and they got what they call these no-see-em bugs, which you can't see them, but they got a mouth that it just eats you alive. And they inject acid on your skin and all. So we just couldn't stand it there no more. He said, I know another place. Let's go and try this place. He said, it's an old abandoned shipyard, and I've caught a lot of fish there. So we loaded up in a car, and we drove about 15 minutes to get to the Shaw Peter shipyard. And the first thing I noticed when we pulled up was postage signs. I said, Charlie, we can't fish here because this is all posted. They don't want nobody on it. Well, don't worry about that. I fish here all the time. So, well, whatever you say, and I figure he did, but I found out later he probably lied about it. So we went in, got out of the car, got our fish equipment, and walked to the pier. And I noticed there was a lot of debris and all that had washed up. And I was thinking, well, they don't keep this up. But come to find out, the tide would come in and bring all this debris, then it'd go out and leave it. We walked to the pier, and I pulled up a log and a bucket there. and sat down, and I was looking out across the Pascagoula River. I was sitting on the east side and looking toward the west. I was sitting on the west side and looking toward the east side, and I noticed there was a big ship out there. Me just going to work in the shipyard, I was wondering how something made out of steel floated. I couldn't figure that out. And that's when I seen the blue lights come reflecting across the water. So at first I thought it was a patrol car and they was there to run us off this property because we was trespassing. But come to find out later, it was a lot different than I wish it had been policemen. So we stood up when these blue lights was there and turned around and looked because we was curious to see what was going on. I guess being nosy. And seen three bulky looking creatures approaching us. But at that time, we still didn't know what they were because you couldn't make them out because the lights were so bright then. It was like a spotlight that come out. And these things was coming in toward us. And like I say, you couldn't make them out. I described them as looked like Green Bay Packers coming out across the marsh grass. So in just a minute, it didn't take long. They got up and two of them got a hold of Charlie and one of them got a hold of me. And I still didn't realize it happened so fast. I didn't realize what was going on. Well, the one that got a hold of me and Charlie both later found out they gave us what I call a I don't care shot. You know, they injected something in my arm and I could feel the injection. And then I just kind of went in la la land where I didn't really care what happened. I was conscious of everything going on. I just couldn't do anything about it. So, anyhow, this one got a hold of me and he lifted me up and carried me toward the ship, the spaceship. And we got to the front door and I noticed I was looking. The bright lights weren't coming from outside the craft. They was coming from inside. They was illuminating out of the walls. And never seen a light that bright. It looked like it was just coming out of the paint in the walls. And he just paused at the door and the light went out. And that gave me time to kind of look around a second. And we made like a left turn and went down a little hallway. And I've lost sight of Charlie now, or touch with him. And then they made a right turn and went into what I call an examination room. Well, when I looked into this room, I seen a glass table sitting on an angle, about a 45-degree angle. And this thing carried me over and laid me on this table. And I was sitting there looking up at the ceiling. He didn't restrain me because he didn't have to because I had had that shot. There's something about the size of a deck of cards that come out of the ceiling, come down and stopped about a foot from my face. And it rotated around my head, and as it would rotate, you could hear a clicking noise. Go click, 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 click. I never thought about it until here lately when I was doing CT scans and all that, but it sounded like one of the machines there, kind of. So when this thing went around my head, it stopped about a foot and a half and it shot back up into the ceiling. And I still didn't realize what was going on. I knew something out of the ordinary was happening. So I was laying there on my back and I could roll my head by then. And I sensed another presence in the room. And I just kind of rolled my head and I looked, and what I call the female alien. Now, don't ask me how I thought it was a female, but it did look like a female. And they could have been a disguise or something to keep me from being scared. This other one was a gray, wrinkled, robotic-looking creature, and he acted like a robot. He went over in the corner and just shut down. And that's when I noticed this female coming out of a different room, and she came toward me. And somebody asked me what she looked like. She looked normal to me. As I said many times before, if I'd been in a bar, I would have probably asked her on a date if I'd been drinking. That's just how normal she looked. Well, she came over, and all I could do was roll my head to the side. But I did notice one thing different about her than usual. Her two middle fingers on each hand was a lot longer. They was way out of proportion, built for a human hand. Well, she took her left hand, put it on my chin, and pushed down, and then took her right two middle fingers and run down my throat, and it went in behind that little hang me down thing in the back, and I was choking and gagging because I could feel it around and started bleeding, and all of a sudden she pulled it out, and she said, "We don't mean to harm you." She didn't physically say it, but that's what I sensed her saying. If it was mental telepathy or something like that, it might have been, but I sensed that. So she pulled them fingers out, and I was thinking, well, it's a little late to worry about hurting me. You done hurt me. And I was bleeding bad all over. And come to look back on it, I think what she was doing was trying to hide some way that she could keep up with me, a tracking device or something in my nasal cavities. So she pulled out and she made a groan like an alligator mating call. And if you never heard one, it just vibrates the water all the way for miles. You could hear them. They say goonk, goonk, and it vibrates. And then these other alligators come to it, and that's what it kind of reminded me of. So, and when she did that, the robotic looking creature that brought me in popped up like a jack in the box, and he came over to where I was and took me by the left arm, and I could feel the injection again, where he gave me another shot and carried me back out and set me down on the river, facing the river, and I was standing up facing the river with my arms stretched out. And that's the first time I seen Charlie when I got back. He was on the ground and grabbed me by the leg. He said, son, you okay? And I was thinking, well, no, I'm not okay. I got a problem, just like you have. So we stood up. Both of us was able to stand up then and turn around and look. And that's when this thing made a little zipping noises, zoop, just like that. Shot up in the sky and disappeared. But that's just the beginning of the story of what happened. This thing just totally disappeared. Charlie said, well, let's sit down and talk about this for a minute. The damage is done. And Charlie was a seasoned vet. He'd fought in Korea, so he wasn't scared or nothing. If he was, he didn't let on like it. So we sat down on the pier and we talked about it. He said, we need to tell somebody. I said, no, Charlie, we're not going to tell anybody. This is our secret. I got to get up and go to work in the morning. Now, what people don't realize in 1973, this is really a taboo subject. People think you're crazy if you come up with that. And something else they don't realize, it was no cell phones, no computers, no social media. So we was just better keeping our mouth shut. Well, we sat there and agreed not to say nothing and just kind of keep it to ourselves and get up the next morning and go to work. So we walked back up to the car. We collected our thoughts. We sat around probably 15, 20 minutes. Loaded up, went back up to the car. And I noticed on my car, the windows were shattered on the passenger side. That was the side facing this object. And they just shattered in place. And when he opened the door, we was in my car. When he opened the door, the glass fell out on that side. And we got in. I like never did get the car cranked. I wound on it and wound on it. Now, what kept the battery from running down, I don't know. Finally, we got it cranked. It didn't run right. And we was headed back to his apartment. And there was a convenience store. And back in, they had payphones on the outside. So he said, pull in here. And I thought he was going to call his wife. So I pulled in and we scratched up a couple of nickels so we could use the payphone from in between the seats where everybody sat and they fell out of their pocket. And he went in and little did I know he called Keesler Air Force Base, which is 30 miles from us. So he made this call and they told him, look, they don't take calls like that anymore. Need to call his local law enforcement, which would be the Jackson County Sheriff Department. And like I say, I couldn't hear what he was doing. He come back and he said, you got another nickel? I said, yeah, I dig under the seat. I thought he might have got cut off. He said, I can't call. I tried to call Keesler. I thought, no, you idiot, once you do that, we agreed to keep this quiet between ourselves. So he went back and he called the local sheriff department. And they said, whoa, wait right there. Y'all don't move. Because I know what they was thinking. They was thinking we was drinking or on drugs or something. And didn't want us on the road endangering anybody. They said, y'all wait right there and we'll be there in a few minutes. And they was good to the word. They showed up just a few minutes right after he got off the phone. Of course, I'm the one that was driving, so I'm the one that got all the attention. They pulled up, two of them asked me to step out of the car. And I stepped out, showed me their driver's license. Then they gave me what I call a field sobriety test. They said, stand on one leg, stand on your left leg, lean your head back, touch your finger with your nose, jump up and down, count 200 backwards. I said, hell, man, I can't do that if I'm sober, much less if I've been drinking. So I went ahead and done what I could. And they got through. They said, well, you're good enough to drive. Drive to the sheriff department. Follow us to the sheriff department. I thought, oh, boy, we in for it now. So we followed them to the sheriff department. And we got out, and it took Charlie and I into separate rooms. They interrogated me in one room and him into another room. Then they put us in a room together. And that's where they have the secret tape come out. And if you hadn't heard that, I believe you got a copy of it.
Right. Here we go.
You know, that's the first time I've really listened to that recording good in a long time. I knew it was one out there, but I never really listened to it myself, although I've got a copy of it.
It's very interesting because the police were actually essentially setting you gentlemen up. They were trying to set you up to see if you were, if you were being genuine with them and all of that. And lo and behold, I mean, I guess they got their answer, right? I mean,
oh, they got their answer. True enough. I know when we came out of the room, the sheriff had showed up, which was Fred Diamond, and he went in and listened to the recording, and he called me over to where he was, or called us over there. He said, y'all go home and get some rest, and I need to get y'all to a doctor or something. Well, I kind of refused to go that night because I was just wanting to get home. I was bloody. I had a white T-shirt on, and it looked like I had been beat with all the blood and all on it. And if I had just known it, of course, back then they didn't have DNA like they do now. But if I had known that, I could have kept the clothes and probably has the DNA of her too, or this whatever it was. And it's hard to say what it was. I'm still looking for answers myself. But to make a long story kind of short a little bit, we got out and the sheriff told us to go on home, and he'd see us in the morning. I thought, well, this is never going to be over. But we did. We went home, and on the way home, when I got back to Charlie's house, which I was renting a room from, I went in the bathroom, and there was paper paper bag and a bleach that she used to clean the bathroom and put the bag in a garbage can. But there was paper bag in there, so I took all my clothes off and put in this paper bag, my shoes, everything, because I just felt unclean. I got in the shower and I took that gallon of bleach, and back then a gallon of bleach was strong. It wasn't watered down. And I started on top of my head and I poured it over my head and I rubbed it in and got out of the shower and washed it off. And somebody said, well, why did you do that? Well, I remember as a child coming up, I'd get poison ivy and something, and my mother would make us bathe in a cap full of bleach, and it would soothe it. And that was the only thing I could think of to do to kind of clean up a little bit. So I put all my clothes in this paper bag, and I got out of the shower and I got dressed and I carried these clothes out to a dumpster on the outside. I didn't want nothing to remind me of what had happened. And come back in, and of course, needless to say, I didn't get no sleep that night. We got up the next morning, and I told Charlie, I said, you ready to go to work? We was in my car again. He said, I don't know. Yeah, let's go to work. So we loaded up and we went to the F.B. Walker & Son shipyard where we was working. And we brassed in. We took our little name tag and brassed in. And I noticed, of course, this is my second day on the job. And I noticed all these TV trucks and these uplinks out there. And back in, they had these uplinks. They'd stick up in the sky and they'd lock to a satellite and send a signal there. And it was news media. I didn't know they was making a commercial or what. So when we got into the shipyard to our workstations, we heard her name being paged on the intercom and told us to come to the office. We got to the office and Johnny Walker, the guy that owned the shipyard, he said, y'all gonna have to do something. We can't use the phones. We can't do nothing. Y'all gonna have to do something. Give a press release and get this media out of here. And they couldn't. Their phones, they couldn't call out because all the media calling in. And he said, I have a company lawyer that works for the company, Joe Flamingo, and y'all work up a press release and give to him. Of course, I didn't want nothing to do with a press release. So Charlie went and worked up a press release, got with Joe, and they released it. And by that time, the sheriff, the big sheriff, Fred Diamond, was there. And he was telling the media how legitimate we was. He even done a radio show telling how he believed it. Now, Fred Diamond was a hard-ass sheriff. I mean, he was straight by the book. And there was no doubt in his mind he believed this happened. And because I've talked to his detectives and all since then. So Fred said, look, I need to take y'all to the emergency room, get y'all checked out. Because if you think about these Apollo missions when they come back, they were so concerned about their astronauts carrying the disease back, they would quarantine them a couple of weeks in a place before they would even let their families in to see them or anybody else. And I think that was crossing Fred's mind at the time. So he took us to the Singing River Hospital in the emergency room. They had a doctor that was already there, which Dr. Bosco, and he's still alive. He's 97, 98 years old. And he examined us, did some blood work and all, and told us to go on, do what we needed to. Well, Fred Diamond said, look, we're not through yet. We're going to go to Keesler Air Force Base, get you guys checked for radiation. I said, radiation? Yeah, I didn't even much think about that. So he put us in the patrol car, and Keesler was about 30 miles away. He turned his lights on, and we hauled butt to Keesler Air Force Base. And when we got in, they just flagged us on through, escorted us to the back, had an escort there. And we got to a little stage in the back, or a loading dock, and I noticed there was 6 guys in hazmat suits, and they had something in their hand. I didn't know what. And everybody went to get out of the car. He told everybody else, he said, y'all stay in there. I just want these 2 guys here. Well, they checked us for radiation, which they detected just a small amount on me, not much. They got this in their report. And they checked us, and they said all clear. They said they want to talk to y'all in the back. Y'all walk down this hall. Well, they let the sheriff come and walk with us. And that was one of the longest hallways I've ever seen in my life. We walked all the way to the end of the hall. And when we got there, it was a lot of military brass. It was, the coast down here consists of 3 counties, Harrison, Hancock, and Jackson. They had the sheriffs and the police departments from each 3 counties and each major towns there. So it's probably, I would say, at least 20 people in there. They wanted us to tell a story. I told them I don't have really nothing to say. And Charlie sat there and told them what had happened. They said, okay, y'all can go. So we walked back down the hall. We got in the patrol car, and he was going to take us back to the shipyard. And before we got there, he said, y'all hold on a minute. There's somebody wanting to see y'all here. And I didn't know who Dr. Heineck was, but he had already made it. How he got here that fast, I don't know. And I'm thinking he had to take a military flight or something, because back in, passenger planes wouldn't come from where he was to here that quick. But he was sitting at the shipyard. Dr. John Allen Heineck and Dr. Harder was at the shipyard waiting for us. Well, when we got in, Dr. Heineck took me to one room. Dr. Harder took Charlie to the other room and tried to hypnotize him. And then Dr. Heineck, he was the only one that I really trusted right then, because he had that grandfather-looking look about him. He sat there and put his face on his elbows like that, and his hands, and talked. And he didn't seem to pressure me like everybody else was. So I sat down and told him what went on and all. Well, he gave me a card. He said, anytime you need me, this is my personal phone number. You call me, and we'll talk about anything. If you just need to talk, call me. Then Dr. Harder took me to the back, and he tried to hypnotize me, but he had to bring me out right at the moment. So we got through, and Dr. Heineck said, I'm going to go to the site where all this happened, and I'll see you guys in the morning. And I was thinking to myself, you're not going to see me in the morning. I'm fixing to escape from this place. So anyhow, I did go back to the shipyard that morning to see him. And Dr. Heineck was really upset for the way they handled the scene where all this happened, because they didn't rope it off. They just let people. By then, the world knew about it, and they was letting people trump all over everything and walk on it, and it upset Dr. Heineck. So we visited there a little bit, and he said, well, y'all can go on. He said, call me if you think of something. So I had his number. I put it in my pocket, and I was ready to leave there. I got in the car. Needless to say, I got hired, fired, and a physical all in one day at the shipyard. That all happened in one day. So anyhow, I got out and I left and went home. Well, I thought to myself, this is supposed to be about a 45-minute to an hour drive to the house, back to Laurel. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not going to say anything about this. course, I knew the news media was there, but I thought it was just maybe local and all that. Said, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to say anything about it. And I kept my word for 48 years. I made the drive home. I got married. This was October the 12th that I got home, or 13th. And I got married November the 9th, that following November. And I wouldn't even tell my wife about it. I didn't tell none of my family, but they all knew and they respected me enough not to ask me. Well, we went 46, 47 years. I didn't mention it again, but I was steady on the move because when the media would catch up with me, I'd quit my job and I'd go somewhere else. I even changed my name. My wife wouldn't even call me by my real name in public. So after 46, 47 years, we had a neighbor that had an aneurysm and had a stroke and died. And we went to the funeral. And when we walked in the door, they have a little log book that you sign. And I accidentally signed my real name on that log book, which the people in the neighborhood didn't know who I was. Well, people started coming forward. They said, "Are you the Calvin Parker?" And it took me just a minute to put it together. And they started asking me about the abduction in '73. I figured that was all old history. I felt pretty safe out there. So, out of respect, my wife and myself said, look, he's got a wife grieving and a daughter grieving. We're not going to sit here and take up anything from them because they just want to take my picture and me give autographs and all that. So I just told everybody we was going to leave. Well, on the way home, my wife said, "Calvin, why don't you write a book?" See, I still hadn't talked to her about it. She was curious to know what went on. I said, "Look, I don't have an education. I can't spell my own name sometimes. I just don't know how to write a book, don't want to write a book." And she kept nagging about that. Finally, I said, "Well, maybe, just to shut her up. You know how a woman is when they get on something with you." And, I don't blame her because I've kept this secret for 46, 47 years from her. She's never pressured me to talk about it. None of my family has, none of my friends have. So we got home and I left it open, well, maybe. But what I didn't know at that time, Philip Mantle was hunting me, and he finally found me through Martin Willis. And Martin gave him my phone number, and Philip called me. But he called me to ask about Charlie's book. He didn't call me to talk about a book that I was going to write or nothing. And just out of conversation, he said, "Why have you moved all this time and all?" I said, "Well, I tell you what, I'm into being honest. And just to be honest with you, every time I've talked about this that happened, the media would change something in it. And that really makes me mad. I mean, it's a good enough story. It's a true story. And the media don't need to be changing anything in it." He said, "Look, Calvin, I didn't call here to ask you about this, but why don't you write a book?" Well, he's on the same page as my wife then. He said, "That will be your legacy. You write this book, will be documented, then the media can't change nothing." So I got to thinking, it made a lot of sense what he said. But I said, "Well, let me think about it." He said, "I'll call you back in a week." I said, "Okay, Philip." But what I did when he hung up the phone, instead of putting Philip Mantle's name on there, I just put "no answer" as a contact on the phone, so I wouldn't answer the call again because I didn't have no intentions of writing a book. I was down launching my boat one day and the phone rung, and it was Philip, and I was busy, and I just reached and grabbed the phone and answered it. Thought maybe somebody might need something from the house. He said, well, have you thought about writing a book? And I didn't want to be rude and hang up. And we talked for probably an hour that day. And finally, he talked me into it, or convinced me that that was the right thing to do a book. I said, look, the conditions are that I'm going to do it in my words. I don't want you to edit the book to correct any spelling or change any words that I put in the book. And he said, you got a deal. And he stood by his word through the whole deal. So we sat down and he coached me. He said, what you need to do, chapter 1 is talk about this, chapter 2 and chapter 3, he said, tell how you met Charlie, and then go into telling your story and all that. So I sat down, I come to my room, I closed the door, I told my wife, I said, I don't want to be disturbed for a couple of weeks. I said, just bring me something to eat about once a day and something to drink. So I sat back here and I started on the book, in which it's a rough outline, but I've had people sit down and say it's just like sitting in a room talking to you. So I finished it up. Philip was good to his word. He didn't edit it. I figured I'd sell 10 copies and I was going to buy them. I said, now, Philip, make sure I want to buy 10 copies of the book and send them to me, because I'm going to give one to my wife and one to my daughter's son, and my family's and my friends. And that way I don't have to sit down and tell them the story. So he did. He sent me about 15 copies. And I handed it out. And that's the first time that my wife and I have talked about what had happened in the book and all. So that's how she found out the story. And then when this book came out, it drawed such interest here in Jackson County on the Gulf Coast. The night that this happened, there was the police department, before we even went in, had 50 calls of people that spotted something, and they had 50 complaints on it. So, it's been a well-documented case. And then we found out that it had, there was eyewitnesses to the account that what had happened. We've also had polygraph tests, voice stress tests, and been interrogated by some of the best. And, people ask me, well, how do you feel if somebody don't believe you? I don't really care if they believe me or not. I know it happened. So if they want to believe, they can. If they don't, can. All I could do is just tell the truth about what happened, and everybody make their own mind up. That same night, before we even went to the sheriff department, the dispatcher had over 50 phone calls of people that had spotted something. And somebody asked me about the guy on the drawbridge. And I said, well, I don't know. But the sheriff department went and talked to him. He was sitting with his back to us in a recliner, sound asleep. And then when the radio would go off, he'd get up and open the bridge. And he admitted he was asleep. Maria Blair's husband, on his deathbed, I went to see him. And on his deathbed, he got them to get a recorder out and record what had happened to them that night, and was telling the truth. And then another case, it's so many witnesses. There was this couple parked just right there where this happened. And needless to say, I hunted them down because I had the tag number when I was hypnotized on the car. So I was able to find them. And he had passed away. They had got married. He passed away. And she was in a nursing home with Alzheimer's real bad. But she did remember the event that happened and asked to keep her private. So, I've done that. It's so many witnesses. Uh, we've took polygraph tests, been hypnotized 3 times. It's just so much that went on. I have some real bad health issues right now, and I think all of them might have been brought on due to some of this that went on. I've never said this before, but I've had 2 open heart surgeries. That didn't kill me. I'm fighting cancer right now. It started in my kidney. I had a kidney removed. My kidneys are at 24% functioning. They wanted to put me on dialysis. I refused. Uh, I'm fighting lung cancer that came from my kidney. When they took my kidney out to give me a 24% chance of living, and I beat the odds. I'm getting healthier now, and it's just I had a stroke in 2012, and I think a lot of my health issues is coming from this adduction in a way. I don't know if they caused it or maybe worrying about this might have brought a lot of it on.
Well, on that subject, what are your feelings toward the aliens? I mean, do you have anger? Are you was it a positive experience? Was it a completely negative experience? What are your thoughts?
Well, I can say now that it was it started out being a negative experience, but the experience is a little better now because I feel like there's a reason that they done this, and they probably had to do it because man is self-destructive. The
Mhm.
human race destroys itself,
Sure.
and politicians destroy the human race. So, you know, I think it's a reason, and I think it's leading up to all this. I really think some of the pandemic that we've been having and all could be caused from some of this, and I really feel that. I don't know it for sure.
Mhm. Well,
Well,
when you were witnessing things past and present and future, I mean, did you see anything that shocked you? I mean, do you remember anything that you saw during that experience?
I remember a lot that I saw, and it really upsets me to talk about it because I'm a very religious person, and I hate to get into predicting because that's strictly against the code of the Bible. But there's some of it that's already came to pass, and we're living in it right now.
Hmm.
Uh, that I seen, and it was a lot of death, and it was through diseases and things like that. So, you know, it's a lot going on now that I've seen back in that. But I don't want to get out and cause a big scare in the community or nothing. Because
right,
a lot of people believe it and they take it really to heart. And
Sure.
then if it's wrong, there's no look at the Heaven Gate guy. He got
Right.
everybody to commit suicide.
Hmm.
So I really don't want to start a big scare and talk about it that much.
right,
And it's something I just have to kind of live with. And if it happens, it's nothing I can really do about it now anyway.
right. But the fact that the aliens knew about it in advance,
They did know about it. I think in one way I look at this like a blessing, and in another way, I look at it like a death sentence. It's destroyed my life to start with. All I wanted to do was get married, have children, buy a house, and have grandchildren, and retire and fish. And it's been a long ways getting there. And I got to give hand support to my wife. She's been behind me all these years and backed me up in all this. Not talking to her, not telling her, but
Hmm.
she's really been concerned. And if there's ever like a movie done and all, I don't really want it all on these aliens. I want it how it affects somebody's life.
The
And
human experience.
this could be a love story, as far as I'm
right?
concerned.
Mm.
We've been together 48 years.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Well, I can certainly understand how difficult it is to talk to somebody that a significant other, let's say, about these experiences. I've had a couple experiences myself. They were not abduction experiences, but they were very close encounters. And how do you mention that? How do you broach the subject? Now, would you like to eat tonight, honey? Oh, by the way, I've seen a couple of UFOs. It doesn't work. And there have been many women that I've dated over the years that have never heard my stories just because I don't know how to go there.
Well, that's like her daddy when this first happened back in '73. I was the biggest skeptic I've ever seen. He didn't believe a word I said. Well, he came back in 4 years later, and he apologized to me. He said, "Calvin, I owe you an apology." And I was wondering, now, what does the old man owe me an apology about? He said, "I didn't believe you when this happened, but there's no doubt in my mind now about what had happened." But he had actually seen one, and that's what changed his mind.
Right.
And even though me not talking about it, he still didn't believe it.
Sure. Well, and you've got those people out there that are sort of, let's say narrow-minded. They're not able to even consider the possibility of extraterrestrial life and things like that. And those are like the harshest skeptics of them all, too, because they dismiss you, they dismiss your story, they assume that you're crazy or that you're making it up for some reason, that kind of thing. When in reality, you've had an experience that has absolutely affected your life right down to the very core.
Oh,
and
100% affected it. But after people get to know me and spend time with me, the first book signing we had, after this, they had it in Pascagoula. They put it on, and my wife told me on the way over, she said, "Don't be disappointed. There's not a lot of people show up." I said, "I ain't disappointed at all. I'm doing this as a favor to the city of Pascagoula because they want me to come do it, and they got all the proceeds on the books that they sold." So we got there. They had to get traffic control to block the traffic around several blocks when this was going on. I ain't never did so much writing in my life and talking and visiting. And people would tell me their stories, and I'd listen. And of course, they knew mine because I got up and did a little spiel for them. But once somebody spends a little time with me, they said, "We never doubt you." But like I said before, I don't care if they do or not. That's up to them. Everybody has their own mind and the independent thinkers. So if they want to believe, they can. If they don't, that's up to them. I'm not one to judge people.
Right.
I do know that Maria Blair, one of the witnesses there, I might have mentioned this before. Her husband was passing away in the hospital, and I went to see him. And he got her to turn his phone on, and he was crying and told all about it. And a man on his deathbed, he's not going to lie.
Right.
So
that's right. That's when people are probably at their most honest. Actually, is right there.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually do have those witness testimonies, and that lends a lot of veracity to your claim. And in the opinion of the UFO Man channel, we feel that you're 100% legit and have been all this time.
Your story was one of the very first UFO stories to actually go what we call today viral. I mean, by the time, I would say within a couple of days, they were talking about your story in Europe and Japan. It was that big. It was that big of a deal. Again, it was a real big thing in my house growing up. It certainly was.
Well, now the book is out in several different languages.
Outstanding.
Even Russia has it, France, Spanish, a lot of different languages. I don't even know how many. I don't keep up with it. So anyhow, it's gone around pretty much to everybody.
Right. You also have a second book, don't you?
I do. the first book that I done, I just kind of told the story, and it was so many witnesses coming forward and so many things happening to back the story that we had to do another book. It wasn't no way out. Such as the Coast Guard had witnesses that night. A Coast Guard cutter went out with 6 men on board, and they took a mooring pole and tapped one of these underwater ones, and they seen it and all.
Wow.
And that's documented in Coast Guard reports. So that ain't no lie.
Mhm.
Right.
Them guys are getting a lot of trouble. But it's so much stuff that come forward, we had to do another book. And Dr. Irene Scott now and Philip Mantle is doing another book on the witnesses that's come forward and what they found out. It just never ends.
I hear that they're doing a blockbuster movie through Lionsgate in regards to Pascagoula alien encounter. Is this so?
I know the screenplay and all's been done. I don't keep up with the movie and all. The only thing I've ever said is I want to have control over it because I want to keep it real. But yeah, I've seen the cover and all, and like I don't know anything about when it's going to come out or what it's going to be or anything. Philip Mantle would know more about that than I would, because I've been so sick I hadn't kept up with nothing going on, and really, as far as me financially, this hadn't helped me a whole lot. It's helped pay a doctor bill or two, but I would like for the story not about the abduction so much getting out, but about the support I had after this all happened. And that's where the real story comes in.
Right.
It's kind of like Christopher Reeves in that movie Somewhere in Time. To me, it's more of a love story, the people around me and all, than it is a abduction story.
Right.
And I don't want something blown out of proportion like Fire in the Sky. I talked to Travis Walton, and he tells you, they got out in left field with that. So that's why I want control over what's going on. And they should have been a movie out, but the pandemic hit, the COVID, and I couldn't get there to have much control over it. So, it just hadn't happened yet. We waiting on the film crew for a documentary to come in next spring, this coming spring, which is not that far away. And I'm sure the movie deals and all is going to follow right in behind them.
I've actually heard a report that the movie itself is touted as being the next blockbuster UFO film, compared to the Travis Walton Fire in the Sky, but with less, let's say, entertainment value and more accuracy.
Yeah, I'm not going to let it get to be a horror story like what happened with Travis. And Travis, I talked to him. We was at a conference in Arizona, and I got to talk to Travis there, and he'll tell you the movie got out of hand and all. Matter of fact, the good thing about since this stories came out and the book and all, me and my wife had never taken a vacation together, and this gave us the opportunity. They would pay me to go to these conferences and speak and pay my way and get us a room and all. And in return, I would buy her plane ticket and she would go with me. So that's a good thing about it. It give us some more time together. And I met some great people. And it's been a lot of fun meeting these people and talking and being around them.
Yeah, we've actually met a lot of people doing interviews and getting referrals through people who know other people. And our interview circle has grown greatly, and we've met some very substantial and amazing people, which you are definitely one of.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Your story is just fantastic. You tell it so well. It's just so easy to follow. And again, this was one of the big ones in history. This really was. This was one of the stories that I think really made people stand up and take a second look at this whole situation, this whole phenomenon, really.
I noticed on that regress hypnosis tape that Debbie Jordan was there. You know, she just came out with a new book and got started with Bud Hopkins. Now, I didn't, up until this happened to me, I never even knew what a UFO was. I wouldn't have never dreamed, never heard of one. Now, since all this, you know, I don't keep up with what's going on. I just started in 2018 keeping up with the UFO industry.
Right.
Kind of what I call the and Philip Mantle's the reason for that. And he is I love Philip to death. If he does a lot of research before he agrees to do anything, he wants to be sure that everything's legitimate.
Right.
And he's going to find out for sure. Even the witnesses, he talks to them way before I do. I have no idea a lot of them that came forward. He's found them.
Mr. Parker, if you wouldn't mind, our audience has just a lot of questions, and if they could ask you a few, that'd be fantastic.
That'd be great.
Folks, any questions you got, go ahead and type them out for us, and we'll make sure that Mr. Parker gets those. There were a bunch of them up in the chat, but they're so far up there I can't.
Advocate for Peace Sells, but who's buying says, thank you very much, Mr. Calvin Parker. God bless you and your family, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just takes so much courage to come forward with a story like this, especially to your point back in 1973, where people were a lot less open-minded about the subject.
Yeah, it was no social media, no cell phones. And, you know, you don't have it like you do now. You can get on a computer and find out everybody's business now.
Right.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing's private anymore. That's for darn sure.
Just to let everybody know, we do plan on bringing Calvin Parker back again for a second interview because he says he has a lot more information to give us. And just to make it easier on him, because he is struggling with cancer, we're going to keep this show at about an hour and a half. And then we're going to have him back.
We have a question. This is a good one, too. This one's from Backwoods Buster. Mr. Parker, have you ever found any kind of implants or anything like that in your body that you know about?
I'm thinking, and this is for the next show, the reason I went to see Bud Hopkins, because I had an implant, but I think it was taken out.
Okay. Interesting. Very good.
Was that the one in your sinuses?
Right. And I believe that when she first was doing this, that's what she was doing, was putting the implant in there.
Well, Calvin, thank you very much for being here with us, sir. What a wonderful story. You've been a wonderful guest. And again, you tell your story so well. We're both just absolutely honored that you're here. This is just amazing. I never thought that I would ever be speaking to one of the participants in that story, you know, that happened so many years ago. And I'm just completely blown away by it. Thank you for being here with us, sir.
Thank y'all for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Too,
Thank you.